And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another episode of THP Range Days in 2020. My name is Dan Edwards, aka Canadan Golf on Twitter. With me today, I almost called myself Canadan right out of the gate, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
With me is J-Man, aka J-Man, aka James Miles. You can find him on social at
you still don't know. J-Man_THP.
J-Man_THP. I knew that. I'm just trying to keep you on your toes. James, thanks for coming in. Today we have a fun conversation that we get to have because it's a product that people don't really see that often. PXG.
Yeah, I mean, I think that says it all right there, doesn't it? PXG. Everybody knows the price. Everybody knows the allure. Everybody knows the owner. So, getting to spend a little time with them was pretty fun when we went up to Club Champion.
So speaking of Club Champion, Range Days in 2020 looked a little bit different from 2019, where we were at a singular golf store using stock shafts made by the manufacturers. This year, we were fortunate enough to partner with Club Champion, head to their Chicago location, and hit an incredible number of iron shots with the exact same shaft in all the heads at the same time. Well, maybe not at the same time, but nearly the same time. In this case, we used the UST Mamiya recoil 95 proto shaft, and we were basically able to take it from one head and put it into the other to eliminate any potential variables. Now, James, the point of Range Days is to educate, and this is not just to say we know everything about everything. What our goal here to do for everyone else is say, this is the tech that's in there. This is what happened when I hit them. And this is what your experience could be like. So if there's a specific iron you're looking for, maybe focus on these. And I think it's a great time to say that we are going to start tonight, I guess today, whenever you're watching the video, with 0211, which is a totally different look from PXG coming into the more recent years. This is their affordable line, James.
Affordable, right? We have to use finger quotations, but honestly, with a lot of the sales going on right now, it has become more of that. So the 0211 was brought forth as their cast iron. I think it's the best way for us to put it. $225 a club originally, which some of you right now, jaws just hit the floor, but compared to the other PXGs we'll talk about, that's pretty a fair price point. So the big things that go on with it, it has a really deep undercut in it. The undercut is going to allow the sweet spot expansion. Basically, the face can flex more. The face can flex more. You make more speed. You add to that they claim to have the world's thinnest face compared to all the other golf manufacturers, which is some bold talk. And then backed by that is their Core 2 technology, which is all about coefficient of restitution and the material which they put in the iron. So this still does feature that. A lot of the things that the big full sets do from the 0211, the rest of from the 0311 lines and all the others.
So the first take I had hitting 5 shots with these was they are very much unique to their own design. And I say that because PXG has a lot of irons in their lineup that are familiar in both design and in sound. When you look at 0211, you definitely get a different presentation just in your hands. But I think also aligning with the sound, you definitely get a different experience as you strike the ball. Would you say that's a fair assessment right out of the gate, James?
Yeah, I mean, it feels a lot like PXG put a lot of onus on the Core 2 material inside and the belief that they could move to a cast design and still have the same feel as the rest of their line. And I don't think they did. I mean, they're a little sharper is what that's the word I would use to describe it whenever you were hitting them. We could definitely tell the transition from the 0311s to the 0211 and exactly what went on there. They're a little more firm.
So I think it's a great time to head to the range and take a look at the 5 shots I took with PXG's 0211. I'd like to remind everyone that we are not selectively taking 5 shots. I don't get to choose which 5 shots. Basically what happens with Range Days is I get warmed up with 1 or 2 shots, sometimes 3, to get a sense of where the iron head is in my swing. And then I take 5 shots, with only the exceptions once in a while being where we're trying to create a little bit of a variable around the face. These are without question 5 shots that I hit, and it is up to the computer to tell me how good or bad it is. So let's go take a look, and we'll come back with a downrange view.
Little toe. That was a little heely.
Found it.
Toe down, yep. Interesting.
Just about there, isn't it?
Interesting. Yep. $5,800, 42 peak, 91 carry.
And James, we're back downrange 0211. I have no idea whether I was happy or sad. The one thing I did know is I think these were a little bit toe down for me, and that is certainly creating a very consistent left to right shape for me off the tee. But again, consistency is key.
Yeah, for those listening, I mean, the general grouping here is peeled off to the right a little bit, but it's nothing drastic. It's definitely, I think, heavy impact on the fact that they were definitely a little bit flat for you compared to your normal one up.
Now, what's great about Club Champion is they promote the ability to fit on the fly. Another wonderful resource they have is a loft fly machine. Certainly at HQ, it's right dead center of the store, and I know for a fact those guys are not afraid to go and bend them upright or flat, depending on what the person who is getting fit is doing. Now we were in some serious club hitting mode, so we didn't really have time to make those adjustments. But you can definitely tell here the first thing we would do in a fitting would be to make a slight adjustment. And as I move into our first bad shot, we're going to review 3 shots from the 0211. The very first one being a little bit toe down, not as much as I thought, James, but definitely hit on the toe side, about 8 millimeters. What would you say, toe of center?
Yeah, well, a little bit to the toe side, and a couple, maybe a groove lower than dead center, which you typically hit. But I had to do it.
Oh,
so
boy.
the bigger part of it, though, I mean, as you see, for those of you that are watching, and those of you who aren't, we saw a little bit of a fade on this one, which it's not as toe down like Dan talked about. But what we can look at and what we can tell you is the face was a tiny bit open to target. So that's going to play a role with the ball flight that we saw. And we also saw a heck of a lot of dynamic loft on this swing for you.
Yeah, I think I was still trying to find where the head was for me. You can tell I probably, based on the fact that the loft is 34.2 degrees, which means I added quite a bit of loft at contact. I must have flipped through into it trying to square up the head. And it obviously didn't work very well for me with only 126 mile an hour ball speed. And the efficiency right around 1.29. Now, I think it's critical to make that note about the dynamic loft, James, because you are inevitably going to see a reduction in ball speed when you do add loft to the head. And I don't want to say this is an impact on the quality of the head technology, but it certainly does continue that conversation we have been having during range days this year, which is sometimes the heads are perfect for someone, sometimes the heads are okay, and sometimes, hey, swing to swing, we'll see what happens. And I think this is a great example of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of swings that you were putting on clubs over it. So the transition, especially to this one, from some of the others in the line, the PXG that we're going to talk about, it's pretty stark, and that brings us back to the difference between the 0211 and the others. I mean, looks wise at address, not so much maybe, but just in hand and for me, whenever I was holding the address and you know the old waggle test, whenever you do the waggle test, there's a difference. There's a difference there. So it takes some getting used to. Either way, you say only 126 ball speed, but all told, the numbers were still pretty playable.
Quite strong. And it's a good time to move into the second shot we can discuss. And this is where that 126 only conversation comes in, because we are actually 7 millimeters heel side. So almost an identical spot from what our last one was, but on the opposite side of the head. Dynamic lofts improved dramatically to 25.6. And we saw an increase of, I believe, 5 mile an hour on the ball speed, which I think is pretty telling of how much that dynamic loft played a role here.
Yeah, 5 miles an hour is big. You're talking about a substantial amount of overall carry yards whenever you're dealing with it. The bigger part that goes to me, we do start to kind of see the lie angle become an issue here, but we also see when the face comes more square to target and the loft is where it should be dynamically for you, the numbers get really, really strong. I mean, you're talking 1.36 efficiency, which is a well struck golf ball.
Yeah, very good for foresight on the GC quad to get that kind of efficiency off of an iron head. And I don't think we need to spend too much time on this because it effectively is the inverse of the last one. I scored it up a lot better. Again, hit it on the inside of the heel, which will inevitably promote a little bit of that fade shape off the head. But again, I'm very satisfied with the efficiency, and I think it's time to. I don't know why I do this, James. I set these slides up and I pick two of my bad ones and one of my good ones. Yeah, I don't know if I'm, just a big fan of ripping into myself. But as I look at this, this is what we would consider one of my best strikes of the series. The efficiency is worse than the one on the heel, and only marginally at 1.35 versus 1.36, which I think is a nice telling feature of the technology. It's definitely in the head, but we really, really promoted some good distance and launch with this one.
Yeah, I mean you're hitting 133 ball speed, and what maybe it's face to target is why we saw a little bit of a dip overall in the efficiency. But when I say dip, it's not. Um, it's proving more than anything though that there is a little bit of room on these irons to play with, and I'm not saying this is a miss by any means because it's not. But what we've seen when we put all three together are for the I don't want to call it lower end because it's not the lower end, but for PXG, I guess it is. It's their what their I'm not gonna say budget friendly either, but their consumer lineup. We'll call it
They're
their
more affordable lineup. Yeah.
more affordable.
Yeah.
But for that, it still performs. I mean, it's an iron that looks all right, feels so, but the numbers are solid.
Well, let's take a look overall at our numbers here. I know we are offering this range days in an audio format as well, so it's a little bit harder for those listening in to get a basic idea. But we are averaging right around 130 mile an hour ball speed through the 5 shots we took. Just over 19 degrees in a launch angle and slightly more than 5,700 RPMs of backspin, which is pretty in line with an aggressive lofted 6-iron, I would say, James.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about here, we came in at what I think it was 27 degrees, so it's not too bad, all told. But your peaks are good, 41 average on peak height and 50-degree descent angle. It will play anywhere on any surface.
So the other thing I think is worth noting here, James, is the average carry distance is 187 yards, but I noticed there's a little bit of a trend between the better struck shots and the worse struck shots. So it's a difference of 182 on average for the two that were weaker and 191 for the two that were great. And for my consideration, being that we've only hit 5 shots and we're not creating a lot of variety between the two or between all 5, aka I'm not skipping anything, you're seeing all 5 of my shots. I think that the quality of my strike and being not particularly happy about a couple of them, to only have 9 yards of difference between a great strike and an okay strike, for me, that's a good number, especially in this design and this length of iron.
Yeah, it gives it a little more credence than I think both of us thought coming into it. The O211 is I don't know. For me personally, I can say I didn't know what to expect at all because you hear so much about everything else, and it kind of felt like okay, here's another iron. But based on the groupings, based on the fact that, like you said, with the miss, if your miss range from good strikes to bad strikes, even in a small sample size, is inside of 10 yards, I think most people take that.
It's pretty comforting to know that that gap in that range is quite low. The one thing I want to do as we transition, I'll bring the photo back up. We wanted to talk about XP as well in this video. Again, it's a more forgiving version of the PXG Iron lineup. More in my realm of sound, I think. I certainly gravitated as a personal preference towards this head over 0211, and this is probably the most personal I've ever been on range days because this is not really about me. You get a chance to hit the two heads and you get to experience two different sounds. What's great to me might be not so great to others. What is unique to me might be perfect for others. So I think kind of an awkward lead in, but James, there's a lot of tech going into Gen 3 from a PXG perspective. And I'd love to hear a little bit of a breakdown from you as we go into that.
Well, yeah, and I mean, in PXG fashion, you have a lot of flash with going to, as you see in the middle of the screen. For those of you watching, for those of you who aren't, you have giant, almost hazard triangles with impact reactor technology, but it fits the persona of PXG. So their reactor tech, as they're calling it, is basically part of a dual core system. So they have an inner core and an outer core on the O311s compared to what we saw with the O211, which is much more like their older generations of one material. Basically, your outer core is going to allow a thinner face and it's going to provide more stabilization, while the inner core is going to have a little bit more rebound to it. The name of the game here for PXG is using these materials to increase the coefficient of restitution, the COR, which for those of you at home who don't know what COR means, or you just see the words, basically when two objects collide, there's an energy loss. We want, as golfers and as golf companies, they want to minimize the energy loss. So the higher the COR, the more energy is maintained. By using these two different materials, they believe they finally found a mixture to allow them to have the thinnest face in golf, according to them, and to expose a lot of ball speed.
One of the other things I'd like to mention, James, obviously we saw two different visuals between 0211 and the 0311 XP. Our intent with range days is to provide you with information that is accessible to you as well. So we are pulling this information straight from their website, just as you would if you were out there shopping for yourself. And that is why it's constructed this way. This is what PXG wants to represent to their consumers. And I think that's critical here. Mm-hmm. James, I think it's a good time to head to the range and take a look at XP. 5 shots. Again, same logic. I hit 5. I either like them or I don't, and we get to pick on me afterwards if I don't. So let's go hit to the range, and we'll be right back.
Oh, there we go. There it is. 1.38 efficiency there, Dan.
Yeah. That's going to be totally different.
Yep. 129 speed.
That's great.
1.33. Club head still stayed good. I mean, you're finding, yeah. $4,300 spin. $5,900. It was a little low heel.
Mm-hmm. And we're back. James, first thing I want to do before I even talk about my personal experience with these clubs is acknowledge the fact that we are seeing a slightly different visual dispersion here from 0211.
Yeah, there's a little bit more movement going on across the board. We saw you end up a little bit left of center, and we saw you end up right of center, which was kind of interesting. And as we get into the data, and we'll be able to explain to those listening a little bit more, the lie angle is a little different here than what we've dealt with in some of our other range days episodes.
So I think as we lead into it, that's the great part. You can see that we have, for those who can't see, we have 2 shots. And by we, I mean me. This is my error, not you, James. We have 2 shots that are clearly shorter than the other 3. And they have spread off to the right. The other ones, there are 2 of them dead down the line, and one that I've clearly hammered that is just a little bit of a pull draw, as it were, down the line with big total numbers associated with them. And I like to see that. As you mentioned, we are going to see a slightly different toe experience in terms of how I'm squaring the ball up. But you're also seeing the impact of a miss. So let's go into one of our first of 3 shots that we get to talk about. And this is way on the inside of the heel, and way is a relative term, but 12 millimeters into the heel and 9 millimeters low. James, what stands out to you the most here?
Two things stand out to me the most. One is the efficiency still manages to sit in at 1.30, which coming from the 0211s we just talked about. And our goal here isn't to compare and contrast, and one's better and one's worse, but we have the reference point of them all. The energy efficiency here is better. To me, on the miss, it's better, which is part of the technology that they're claiming to have with the reactor tech. Other than that, though, spin number, total spin hits about 6,000 RPMs. Backspin overall is 5,940. That's a pretty good number for an iron that, by the way, is only 24 degrees in loft.
Yeah, and the ball speed surprised me a little bit on this one, and we'll obviously get to see some variances as we go through the 3 shots with this. But anytime you go inside heel, you do have a chance to lose something somehow. And I think the more critical conversation here is how it misses. In this case, it was a little bit short and a little bit right. And I think based on the location of the head, James, I probably deserve that result overall, if not maybe something worse were there less technology built into the head.
Well, I mean, yeah, a heel strike, no matter what we do for moment of inertia and for gear effect and everything that we do, if you catch it heel enough, you're typically going to see that fade ball flight if you're a right-handed golfer.
So there were 2 little mini fades that were shorter. I have a feeling as I click right on my keyboard, we're going to see the next one that was off to the right as well. And naturally and surprisingly, this one actually closed in on the center of the head a bit, James. Obviously, there's a bit of a better ball speed here at 129 versus 127. The efficiency has improved from 1.30 to 1.33. And I think a big part of that is closing in on the center of the head. We're now 5 millimeters heel and 7 millimeters low, which is a little bit better than the last one we showed.
Yeah, I mean, you literally do close in a little bit better on this one. We see a better face impact as far as angle is concerned. We also see the dynamic loft more in a range that I kind of expected it to be, because these are stronger lofted. I'm not going to use the loft jack thing, but for the iron in their lineup, I know you love that conversation. The iron in their lineup, that's what this one's supposed to be. It's the strongest of the 3 by, I think, 3 or 4 degrees, the strongest of the 3. So
I do like that conversation, mostly because you don't see my dynamic loft get down to this realm on many irons like this. So that at 21.3, that's quite good for me. And I would consider that a win from the iron standpoint. The other thing I notice here, James, is the club head speed is a little bit slower. So we are magnifying these numbers appropriately in the improvement because the swing speed is slower, but we are still seeing stronger ball speed, which is great. And I think what you should expect to be rewarded on a better strike. And speaking of better strikes, thank goodness we get to talk about a good one, James. The final for XP, which is, I think, my final shot with the head, and it came in at 135 mile an hour ball speed with 1.37 efficiency, which is much, much better than what we've seen. Even though it is marginally, I'm going to say much, much better because it makes me feel good. What do you see?
It was mushed. Are we using that one on this one?
We can use that, yeah.
I mean, it fits though, right? But again, look at your dynamic loft off of it. For those you can't see, it's 23.9, which again for Dan in a bigger, more game improvement iron is something we don't typically see. I mean, when we think about these irons, this is a good case study for us to talk about loft and why the lofts have changed the way they have. If we had a traditional loft on an iron like this, for him to still be hitting it as high as it is, and you guys are going to see and hear from us that data here in just a minute, you would be even more sky high. So for it to only come in at 23.9 with this efficiency, I mean, this is a struck golf ball.
And pretty low spin as well. We're at 2 millimeters heel, so barely inside the middle of the face, and 5 millimeters low. And being low of center usually means a touch more spin. In this case, we're at 5,179, which is outstanding from my perspective, especially the way I hit the ball. And when we're launching at 19.3 degrees, as we move into the actual club data itself, as you can see, I'm right in that 50-degree descent angle, which last I checked is not going to have me concerned, even with a 6 or a 7 or a 5 iron, about launching it through the greens with a big bounce. That thing's coming down like a pancake.
Yeah, I mean, 50 degrees will play on any type of surface, which is the nice thing. More than that, though, we talk about peak height. The peak height averaged out to 42 degrees. So we're talking compared to the 0211s, it's 3-degree difference in the 6 irons, right? but we're still seeing similar peak heights overall in it. And that's why we emphasize so much on THP to everybody. Club design matters. Like, these things are not just haphazardly done by companies. The design is meant to optimize things for a variety of golfers across the spectrum, from somebody who strikes it like you to somebody who has other needs like me.
So let's have big faith, and if the lofts are set by a company, commit to them. Try them for yourselves. And this is the great thing about partners like Club Champion, who are accessible in so many cities. If you go in there and you talk to them, I want to start with stock and let's see where we go, you're going to learn an awful lot about club technology from a variety of companies and what works for you, which is fantastic. The one thing I wanted to do, James, as we wrap up XP, is talk about just overall numbers, looking at 130.8 from a ball speed perspective, especially with those 2 misses in there, I think is pretty exceptional. But my numbers have also slightly improved from a launch or distance perspective. So now we have 192 in total, but I really kind of maxed out at 199 and 200, which for XP is it's a wonderful nod to them and the quality of the product they have.
I mean, that's the point of this set in the lineup, is to try to keep the ball in play as much on the misses. So it's kind of fortuitous that we saw a bigger miss out of this sample size and this set size. I mean, for you to only hit a peak height of 39 yards, I'll tell everybody listening at home, is pretty rare, and it kind of goes to show to it. And we saw, I mean, that was just a swing that was the way it was. So we ended up with the 181. So it skews things a little bit, but if that's your bottom, that's still not bad.
Yeah, it's a good bottom to have. And what I really wanted to do is draw some comparisons between the two, and that's why I've put back up on the screen the 0211 with the XP data aligned with each other. And the first thing I really want to do here, James, is while 0211 has 16.3 yards of offline to the right, I think it's critical to say here that it is not a fade bias golf club. The biggest difference between the two heads for me was a lack of adjustment. You saw with XP, my toe is actually up in a couple of them and actually pretty neutral in quite a few of them. Whereas with 0211, I had a number of shots that were quite toe down. So a simple adjustment there would certainly sort out my offline, and bring it more towards the center. And that was my biggest takeaway for this, James. What do you see when you compare these two? What was your experience for me as a golfer hitting the two of the heads?
Well, first off, the first thing that I always like to look at, I always like to compare ball speeds, because to me, ball speed will never lie. Between the two irons, I would have expected the XP to have a higher overall ball speed, and it did. It came in at 130.8 on average, whereas the 211s were at 129.8. So we're talking 1 mile an hour, but it's still important enough. The other part of the story is the 211s in people's heads and in our heads. Whenever we were going into this, we believed, okay, these are going to spin more, and they do. I mean, 5,700 RPMs on average versus 5,200 RPMs on average. The irons slot like they're supposed to. The XP is a lower spin iron that's going to launch higher, even though it has a lower set loft than the 211s do. And this is, again, case in point of filling out the options for golfers.
And that was going to be probably my final comment with regards to this product. Is you see a variety of price points, design elements, sound, just an overall experience that is different. And they've now offered a more affordable product that has clearly shown the capabilities of competing with some of their more refined elements of equipment. I think this is a great telling story for 0211. If I think it's important for you to go out and hit them, and I would not be afraid to hit 0211 against XP to determine what worked for you, because clearly it wasn't that far off for me.
No, I mean, options are good. We say that from always. Options are good.
So, James, I think this is a wrap for the more forgiving irons from PXG. Now, we do have an additional PXG video that either is available for you to watch or will be available for you to watch, depending on when you digest this version of Range Days. We're excited to bring that as well. And me specifically, I found a head that really worked for my game, and I can't wait to talk to you about it. James, thank you so much for taking the time. For those who have enjoyed this video, please take a moment to comment and tell us what your thoughts are on PXG's product, whether you're interested in them or not. Please also, if you can, take time to subscribe. We will have more videos for Range Days, and we actually do currently have more videos available for you to consume. And please like the video if you enjoyed the content. So James, thank you so much for being here. As always, I do appreciate your time. And for those of you who are looking forward to the next video, stay tuned.